just briefly, just to let you know who I am, my name is Tracey Boyd. I've been practicing family law in Fayette County for 14 years. I'm running for family court judge, but I think the reason that I'm here is I'm the one that started the firestorm that Sarah was speaking of. I just had some musings one night, some things I was thinking about that were really on my mind, and I got a box of Kleenex and cried it out and wrote it down on paper, and then I posted it to the website, and that's kind of what got me here. It was, you know, you've seen in the media at least those couple of incidents, the one with the water bucket challenge, it really hit home with me, and then the little boy that got beat up at the party, and some adults were actually encouraging it, and those things just really bothered me. My son is 10. He has higher functioning autism. He was diagnosed with ASD right after they got rid of the Asperger's diagnosis, and he's starting middle school next year, and I really worry about it. I don't know if he's being bullied right now. His teachers say that he's not. I'm not entirely sure that I believe it. I've had reason to think otherwise, but I know it's something that I want to be really proactive about, and I'm really passionate about protecting kids from being bullied, not just children with autism, but children with any disabilities or any child at all. I don't think it's something that should be tolerated at any level ever. So I'm really here to learn more from you about what you think can be done, you know, with the court system, whether I'm elected or not. I feel like I have a platform where I could maybe help people. So anything that you have to say is going to be very helpful to me. I'd like to take it back to the appropriate people who may be able to do something about it.
Thanks for being here. Diann?
Well, I know a lot of faces in this crowd, so I just appreciate you all inviting me here. I don't pretend to be an expert in bullying. There's a whole lot in the literature about bullying. I'm familiar with it, but in terms of knowing it backwards and forwards, I'm here to talk about it for you, but I won't say that I'm the expert on bullying. I am an Associate Director for Special Education in Fayette County. For those of you who do not know me, one of the hats I wear are looking after programming for students with autism. I supervise the Autism Resource Specialist. I supervise assessments for students with autism and a lot of eligibility. I have a passion for kids with autism. I think some people who know me in this room would know that, but just I have a passion for kids, making sure that their needs are met. I have 2 children of my own who have their own special needs. I shouldn't have said that on camera, that they will not like me for doing that. But I also have a nephew.
Don't worry, they'll not.
Oh yeah, YouTube, are you kidding me? But I also have a nephew who has Asperger's, and so I've kind of seen it from all sides. I've seen the bullying issue as a parent. I've seen it in the schools. So I'm here to help as much as I can.
Thanks for being here.
Myra Bundy. I'm the geek that brought a few slides. I promise they're just like 4 of them.
I'm impressed. I was like,
well, I'm a professor, so I never go anywhere without my laptop and a few boring slides, just to kick everything off. It's just my own, whatever, you know, my thing that I usually do is look at slides, so I thought I would start us off with a few things.
It's around your roses.
I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor. I've been teaching at EKU for about 18 years now, and I think I've known some of your kids that long. I think one person I can remember bit me. What age was that? I don't know. I must have been about 2 years old. So I have some happy memories with all these kids who are now adults. I really do love that. I love getting to follow people through. You know, that's really been one of my best educations, I think, is to just get older and know cohorts of children and see how they grow up and what their parents do for them and with them. And I just really love that. I love people with autism and their families. Just it's fun to come and talk about this issue. This is a sad and not as fun issue. I was thinking, why couldn't you have invited me to come and talk about fun special interests in people with autism? That's what I enjoy doing. But sometimes we have to talk about the hard stuff too, so it's good to be here. And I have several children of my own, some with special needs, so you know, I have enough children that we have bullying within my group of children. We have bullying sometimes. So my husband and I think about it a lot. I'm thinking about the kids with disabilities and without, and different personalities, and how that all works, and what you do about that. I mean, I think I have a microcosm to remind me to think about these issues. I have some interest in bullying from a social psychology perspective. So I teach a class on empathy, and I started teaching it because I was reading about autism and empathy development, and sort of empathy differences in people with autism, but I'm also interested in sort of how bullying relates to empathy and what characteristics of bullies can be. And so I have sort of that more academic interest in it. And then, of course, from more of a personal and clinical point of view, of course, I've had many clients through the years who've had bullying as an issue in their life, very common. And lots of parents worrying about it, and have been a bully and have been bullied myself, years ago. Bullying is nothing new, right? We're just getting more aware of it and trying to do something about it, maybe more than we have in the past. I think we have some handouts. Diann brought some sort of resource handouts, and I brought something that may possibly be sort of inflammatory and depressing, so
I can do it.
just hand it out here. This is just something that is brand new. I thought people might want to see. It's what they call a dear colleague. Depending on what a dear colleague letter is, somebody might be able to explain this better than me. You know what it is? Oh, Tracey. What's a
I
dear
really
colleague?
don't, I was gonna ask, so.
Well,
I think I have
what
it.
I know about it doesn't exactly, I think it's something that comes like from a representative or a senator, and then like this letter comes out and it gets distributed in all the representative's office or all the senator's office. But this one is from the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, and it's about bullying and disability. You guys, attorneys, might be interested. So I brought this, and I have a couple little things I thought we might go through a little of it. And some of you guys are so obsessed about, really knowing all the details. You guys are always educating me. So I figure I'll give you this, and then you'll come back and talk about the implications on the listserv or teach me more about it. I just went over it a little bit briefly. But what I thought we might start with, I don't want to share this with you guys. I thought we might start just talking about what characteristics, this is something I was thinking about when I thought about coming in here today. How does the autism spectrum relate to bullying? What's the overlap? What are the issues that are going on? And I have some ideas that I wrote down, but I know you guys have ideas too. Why do you think this became an issue to the degree that you decided to have a special, night to talk about this? That Tracey stayed up all night writing this letter and then shared it, and everybody reacted to it. Obviously, there's some relationship between these two concepts. What do you think it is?
Odd behaviors.
Yeah, unusual behaviors.
Well, I think they can't stand up for themselves when they don't speak up for themselves. So they don't
Okay,
have
so
a voice.
difficulties with knowing how to respond to
Right.
what other people do, or being like maybe assertiveness
Or
difficulties.
even tell the teacher what's
Yeah,
going on.
actually, I didn't have that down.
Or
So.
even communication, just not, a lot of kids with autism are nonverbal, so
Mhm.
they couldn't stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, mine just wouldn't tell anybody what's going on.
Right.
So it could potentially be the same incident happening to a neurotypical child versus your children could possibly be a bigger deal because it might go undiscovered or unreported or something like that.
We actually find that Wesley, who is our more classically autistic son, he's marked as different or special, and people are actually kinder to him
Yes.
and give him
Yeah.
more support.
Space.
Because, whereas his brother, who is abrasive and obnoxious and doesn't care what people think of him and gives a really good big reaction, is much more fun to pick on.
Right.
But then he comes home and picks on his brothers.
Mhm.
So it's just interesting to me, the different dynamics of how society relates to different clients based on their level of disability.
Yeah, like you have big disability, so we'll sort of give you a pass.
Right.
Whereas
Whereas you're
you
just a
have
little
small
different.
disability, you're kind of a jerk, so.
Well, it's kind of
we'll
a
get
hidden
you.
disability for those with higher functioning autism kids. I mean, it's kind of a hidden disability.
Yeah,
My
more subtle.
son looks very typical. And a lot of times people will comment to me, I didn't even know that anything was wrong with him. I didn't know he had
And
autism.
it can look like
it's
obnoxious
hard.
behavior. I
It
mean, it can
does.
look all kinds of different ways, but one way it can present as, geez, this guy's kind of rude. Why is he saying this? And I think about,
Why does he only want to talk about Minecraft?
or why did he call me out on whatever when nobody, why did he not say face? We have a lot of complicated face-saving things that we do, And a lot of times people with autism will accidentally violate that. Sometimes that gets people, I just know because I've had my own face-saving violated many times over the years. I know most of my physical flaws and a lot of my other flaws. Because people with autism will frequently tell me those things. And it can really hurt. They don't mean to be hurtful at all, but it can be painful. So sometimes one way that this relationship can happen is somebody may feel that they're being bullied by somebody on the autism spectrum when actually that person is just thinking they're being honest or saying what they think and they're not meaning. So I think sometimes people with autism can be unintentional bullies or be perceived as bullies. We've had some incidents like that at EKU where we needed somebody to come in and explain what had really happened. Maybe a classroom or a professor thought they were being bullied by the person, but then when we could explain, oh, that's why they did that. So sometimes it's misunderstandings. And I think, you guys tell me what you think about this. For my notes, I think sometimes you can take the behavior of a student to a neurotypical kid, depending on the person's temperament, versus a kid with autism, and it can really feel bullying to the person with autism, while the neurotypical kid might be more able to blow it off or not be offended or not be. Sometimes our guys can be so obsessive or sort of ruminative on something that's happened, they just can't let go of something. So it just becomes this terrible hurt when somebody else might just be able to let it roll off their back. But what we have to be careful about is not saying that wasn't a big deal. In other words, it may not have looked like a big deal to somebody else, but it could really feel like a big deal. So we kind of have to educate everybody about that ourselves. And again, I've got such a microcosm at my house. I definitely think I could take my different kids and behave toward them in a certain way, and each of them would have a different reaction. Maybe your guy that has more classic autism, something you'd be like, whatever, I got my own things I'm doing. Versus your other guy is more sensitive and really getting in there and trying to socially interact, and it's hard for him.
And often doesn't correctly read the situation. He might say, this kid knocked my books out of my hand, and it may not have been intentional.
But he doesn't know how to read the facial cues that
Right,
tell
so
him.
as parents, we have to sift through, because he's also been truly bullied, to when is it something that we need to address, and when is it something that we need to use that as an opportunity to teach him how to read the situation, or,
And
how to
sometimes they
make
don't
up
even
with the kid
recognize
that
that
has
they're
the
being
locker
bullied.
next to
Yeah,
him.
that's what
problem.
I've seen as well, is not recognizing, that some of the literature says they're put up to do things, or they're put in situations where they're coerced to say things to other kids, or maybe they're in situations where they're being victimized, but they don't realize it. They might be made fun of, but they think that this is a positive attention that they're getting for the behavior.
Friendship.
These people really like me, so there's that
It's
risk
like that
there.
ice bucket challenge. I mean, that boy had no idea. He thought that he was being made part of the group, and he was doing something that everyone across America was doing. I mean, in reality, they were bullying him the whole entire time, and he had no idea. And I mean, that's what I see a lot with my son. I mean, sometimes I will see children picking on him, like at the swimming pool or something, and he's oblivious to it. I'll say, did you not want to play with those boys, or do they not want to play with you? And he just kind of blows it off like it's not a big deal, and I really think he doesn't know sometimes, which as a parent, you're slightly grateful for that, because no one wants their child to hurt, but you also worry a lot about manipulation. I mean, I worry what's going to happen when he's older and kids get a little more mean, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and there are less supervisors on top of it, and they get adequate stuff.
I want to add something. I know with mine, he never really, I don't think he had the feelings to really know, like, he was being bullied at the time. I mean, he didn't really have to, he didn't feel like sad or whatever. But he did after he got hurt and was like physically bleeding and things like that, he knew something wasn't right. But I mean, he'd sit in the classroom and didn't tell anybody all day. I mean, like he was believed like they were forcing him to like eat pepper packets on the playground, and then he came into the classroom and he was like pushed and cut. So he sit like in the classroom and like he was bleeding during the day. And then they finally noticed that he was bleeding. And then when he got to me though, he told me what happened, that afternoon. So, and then another incident with him was like when he was in second grade, that happened like in the fourth, but then like someone locked him in the bathroom and wouldn't let him out. But I mean, he never really recognized like that was something he should tell somebody.
Or that he could tell somebody, and maybe somebody could help him.
Or get help somehow.
One other note, you guys covered a lot of stuff that I didn't think of. One note that I had relates to a study that did you just hurt someone's broken leg?
I'm bullied. Am I bullied?
It's just a bad sprain.
Sprained legs?
Heavily protected. It'll be fun.
So I did this research study that related to sort of including kids together and sort of getting kids in the same group, getting kids together with kids with autism and kids without autism. And I looked at how effective it was and all this stuff. And there'd been all this research doing the same kind of thing with kids of color, kids, different kinds of diverse groups. But something that I thought was interesting is some of the previous research that had found a lot of positive effects of just getting kids together. They call it like proximity, getting kids in proximity. It's because socially, once you got the kids together, there weren't that many differences. And I think what's tricky about autism and figuring out how to sort of build those friendships is once you get the kids together, there are differences. The differences are still there. Those social differences can be really profound. So it's like extra, it just requires extra sensitivity. How are you going to, because to me, prevention of bullying is all about team building, and sort of school climate change and all that kind of stuff. And it can be tricky to do. I don't think impossible, but it can be tricky to do because as social beings, we're sort of created to do out-group and in-group kind of stuff, and you see this person doing whatever their autistic behavior is, and you think, this cannot be someone in my in-group, this must be someone in my out-group. Unless you're somebody who's had a lot of experience. So I think building experiences, I think a lot of you guys who have worked really hard to keep your kids in their home schools, and you're sort of talking about, I know you did homeschool for a while, no wonder after those circumstances. But I just think it's a lot of work to not just do the person with autism is with you, but how can I help you relate to this person? How can I teach you about autism and what it's like and why he's doing this? And how can I help you see the good characteristics that he has that may be hidden by the differences that you see? It's a challenge. I think it's more of a challenge than some other kind of integrative social kinds of things that people do.
And also, another thing I want to point out is, a lot of times it's other kids in special ed, because they're the ones, that are doing the bullying, because,
They're exposed to the annoying
he
behaviors.
was enticed to kiss a young lady in high school. I'll give you $1. I mean, and he could have been, he could have been suspended from school for harassment, So, it's not just the typical kids that are doing it, so that's just something I wanted to point out.
Yeah, good point. It's a really good point.
And the other thing is, I keep,
Good. I like all these comments.
Sorry, go ahead.
well, things I think about is, like you spend time when they're younger trying to protect them, doing whatever you can, like what you guys are talking about now. And then as you move into adulthood, that whole thing about, becoming like a self-advocate, you know what I'm saying? And how do you do that? Because it's almost like you're turning the ship around, 180, but, beginning to teach him about how to stand up for himself and how to, be able to work, say things more independently. And that's been a challenge, I think, for Jay. That it's not something that comes easily because he doesn't have the concept of it, comfortably.
So do you think
social skills, I was just going to say, there's some social skills groups over at Casper. That's exactly what they're trying to do. My son's getting ready to start in his fourth group over there, and they're actually helping them to learn how to model certain things that they can say and do. You can walk away. You can tell an adult. Here are some examples of things you can say back to someone if that happens. And it's like anything else with autism, especially higher functioning kids. It's kind of a learned behavior. If they repeat it over and over again, eventually it's going to stick up in there and it's going to help. I've noticed a difference in my son since he's been going.
Big things we're doing now is like, we'll say, do you want to take a bath? No. So So, that's,
Standing up to you.
and I'm like, that's cool, to a point, but it's good, but you know what I'm saying, but it's going in the right.
Oh, and so like you're saying, you've sort of been working on compliance all this time, and now you're switching and saying, wait a minute,
Well,
gotta be independent too.
Gosh, yeah, don't say my name,
Do
but.
you think bullying's, I was gonna ask you, do you think, or all of you, do you think the bullying issue goes away, like at 18? Or, is it, college? There's bullying on college campuses.
Different form of bullying, the older they get, yeah.
But I'm sure it's a lot less, because kids in college have better things to do.
Oh, let's hope
Yeah,
so,
you
most
would
of them.
think so.
Probably more exclusion than outright bullying at that point, but.
I mean, bullying continues into the workplace, that's why we have
Yeah.
harassment
Exactly.
policies
That's
and all
true.
those things. So I think it's a
Good point, yeah.
lifelong situation that we are all dealing with. I think even in our adult lives, we can even think back to some of those situations. But, looking at, a lot of what we do, trying to do within the school starts with prevention, because there are a lot of bullying programs, and there's the Alveus, I believe is that his name, Alveus? A lot of programs out there that are based upon, teaching children how to protect themselves from bullying, bully proofing, bully busters. There's also programs to try to teach kids not to be bullies.
Right.
But at the same time, we need to focus on prevention at that very beginning level within the classroom. So what can we do to create a positive environment that fosters, positive social relationships with each other, and looking at cultural differences and things like that, that's more an inclusive environment. And sometimes what we read is that, I think somebody said it already, about educating others about your child, educating them about, my child is unique. Not necessarily you, but us as a district, or us as a classroom teacher, us as anybody within the school, being able to educate. Now, the one thing I cannot do is I can't tell anybody about your child without your permission. So if I were to do something in a classroom that maybe was teaching the class about autism, people with autism, and maybe about unique to this student, then I would have to get your permission to do that. But what we have found in our classrooms, that when we are able to do that, it does foster more positive social relationships. There are ways that we can develop, like circles of friends, we can develop peer coaches, things like that for kids who are needing those types of interventions within the schools. But I saw some hands going up as I was talking.
He had a question. What was your thought? Do you remember it?
I remember been thinking about it for over a year now. We ran into a situation with Fayette County Public Schools where my son Luke, 12 years old, Asperger's, he was a victim of bullying. And the school kept saying, this was coming from official people representing the school in a official capacity. And they said over and over again, that's not bullying. That's not bullying.
Because there has to be a power differential.
It has to be a power differential,
But
it
they
has to
would
be
expound on
over
what that
time,
was.
it has to be, there's one other thing.
It
There's
might be
legal-
harassment.
There's
But-
legal definitions.
But the
of
thing is,
bullying.
as a parent, you're not, it seems to me that Fayette County Public Schools is, rather than using a common sense, reasonable definition of bullying, because you want to separate trivial cases.
There's
You
a
bumped
little,
into me.
sort of a, I don't know if this is the definition that was
well-
used for you, but
But you want to separate trivial cases from the real thing, rather than using a reasonable common sense definition, understanding of bullying. Fayette County Public Schools is using this legalistic term to hide behind it. And it's skewing your stats. It's all of your stats on your schools are meaningless. I mean, Jesse Clark has more bullying than Southern Middle? I don't think so. I highly doubt that.
Well, and I can't,
And you can't compare year to year.
So
Because
you think that definition is sort of causing underreporting or something?
yes, absolutely, it's causing underreporting. It doesn't get reported unless you fill out a form, and the form gets accepted and signed in triplicate and goes through. And, I mean, we were told over and over and over again, that's not bullying.
That's
And
what this deal
And they
So,
wanted to
which
withhold
means-
giving our son a
This is why.
504.
So this is a definition of
But
bullying.
this
And
doesn't
I think for
apply.
special
It's
needs
not
kids, it should
bullying.
actually
This
be a
doesn't
lower
apply.
standard.
I don't have my
I mean,
reading
because
glasses on,
I
I'll go
think
over
that
it.
the denial, I think it's a
Look at
denial
all- look at
of
all this
free
list of things
access to
that
a
are-
public education if you
See,
didn't
and
get to that
that's what's
point.
so confusing, is reasonable
Frustrating
people read
sometimes.
this, and they hear these situations, and they say, well, of course that's bullying. You know, two students deliberately sought my son out on the walking track and pushed him down over the course of several days. Any reasonable person looks at, here's that situation and says, that's bullying.
But when he brought it to the attention of the person monitoring, he was not allowed to go seek out the guidance counselor because he was supposed to be there. And when he tried to rectify it or bubble it up, he was shut down. And then there is no effectiveness in ignoring. What happens is then the behavior escalates and escalates because they're looking for the reaction. It's not, it's like rape, it is about power. More so than it is the physicality or the whatever. And so then they pushed him down off the bleachers.
Did they say that was bullying?
No,
No,
no, they never said any
because
of
even
it
though it was
bullying.
2 girls and 1 boy, there was no power differential. It had not occurred over a period of time.
That sounds like they're using the definition of harassment, like a legal definition.
They said indeed it might be
But
harassment,
harassment
but it
is-
was not bullying.
I think harassment is just as bad, if not worse than bullying legally.
But at that time, he did not have legal protected status because he didn't have a 504, which he does now, and therefore they will be held to a higher standard.
I would be glad to talk to anybody about Fayette County issues after the meeting. If there's anything I can do, I'd be glad to help anybody.
I'm sorry, we didn't mean to hijack.
It is okay.
Oh, that's okay.
I just-
She's here to take advantage of you.
On the other hand, it's not hijacking, because
You're not.
what are we talking about? Are we talking about a reasonable, common sense understanding of bullying, or are we talking about the legalistic definition of bullying?
There are definitely legal definitions of that, and one of the handouts I brought you guys tonight was a website that.
Want to pass this out?
Yeah. There are websites on
Here, actually,
here
give me one.
that you can go through and look at how different states have defined that, since it's been in part of the legal mandate that everybody has to have some sort of bullying
But
policy.
it doesn't matter what the state
I
says. If the
agree.
principal
Yeah.
and the
I agree that common sense should
people
prevail
in the schools are
on
not
many
defining it as
situations.
bullying, it doesn't matter what the state says.
And I think what I would say is, we can't always, well, you know this, we can't always assume that every person you have to work with is going to be a reasonable person that's going to do the right thing. So,
Yeah, but I think that we can address bullying. Most bullying happens at schools, and if the schools are not doing enough to address it, we as parents, there's nothing that we can do.
And I think.
I mean, and I don't mean to throw Diann
Although
under
you
the bus,
can-
and no
but
one
you
is
can
trying to
move
do
on
that.
up the
You just
line.
happen to be the same person,
Okay.
but.
But you don't want to have to file a lawsuit to
Well,
do it.
you,
yeah.
And if it comes to that, then what is your right?
I mean, for example, in family court, I mean, where we run into students the most is in truancy court and status offenses. I mean, if enough children were referred to status court, not just for being out beyond the control of the school, but for pervasive bullying, we could address it in the family court system. I mean, but
What
it
is
doesn't
status-
happen enough.
Status what?
Status offense is one where a child ends up in court just by virtue of their age. In
Yeah.
other words, it wouldn't be illegal for us to do it. Skipping school, being beyond the control of a school or parent, smoking, drinking, things that but it's illegal just because of your age. And kids get referred to status court for that. They have to go in and show up with their parents and explain why they're doing what it is that they're doing. Sometimes they're referred to juvenile delinquent homes. There's a bunch of different, resources for it, but they very rarely get referred there for bullying, because I think that the schools sometimes don't want to admit that it's as bad and pervasive of a problem as what it is.
And the other thing that I hear you saying is that it's very frustrating to feel that, as a parent, it's really frustrating to feel that somebody's taking a protective stance,
Yes.
for themselves, when what you'd hope they'd be doing is trying to come up to the table and problem solve about how to
Help
fix
fix
this
it.
problem, you know?
Absolutely.
Being defensive instead of being proactive and saying, oh goodness, you know, what are we gonna do about this? Let's get together.
This dear colleague letter though is really,
Here, let me show you.
is really
Oh, that's
powerful.
just the segue I was waiting for.
Hey, you guys-
Sorry, guys.
Myra.
You can blame,
Can I just say something, Myra?
Yes,
Just
anytime.
for the record, we don't intend for this just to be about Fayette County. We talk about getting people from other districts in
And
because
I'm
this
from
is.
Anderson.
Okay, well, good.
I'm from Jessamine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this is
we-
not a, this is not limited to
just Fayette
county.
County,
No, no.
it is
This
universal
is life,
across the
yeah.
country.
Right.
Yeah,
It is
nationwide.
universal, and it does, unfortunately, when people did start to try to give attention to it, you know, the first thing that happens is it goes to the courts. Then the courts have to give a legal definition of this, and that's one, the prongs that you're talking about are some of the legal, you know, things that, criteria that have to be met, and I'll, you know, I'm probably gonna slaughter.
But you know,
it too.
legal criteria don't have to be met for somebody to
No,
step
and
in
I know,
and try
that's
to
what I
be
want to say to
assistive.
you. That's what I want
You
to
know.
say to you. I understand that the legal issues, there's legal issues with due process and special education, and all the Ts have to be crossed, and the Is have to be dotted, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, you want to feel that your child is safe, cared for, and has a right to an education in any district, any state, any school.
Well,
And that's
he was,
what we
he
want.
was not safe, he was not cared for,
Okay.
and it was not taken care of, and so we went down there and actually
And
spoke with the
there are
principal.
55 schools, and I can't speak to what goes on in every one of them, and even in our own district.
I'm not asking you to.
Oh, I'm not.
I'm not
I know.
asking you to.
I
I'm
know.
not saying,
I'm-
I'm just saying that this
Right.
is a problem.
Yeah,
Exactly,
frustrating.
and I want to hear you, I want to take back the information so that I can share that with others and try to impact some change.
Please
So I
do.
do want to hear from you. I'm not feeling on the defensive, and I'm not trying to defend. I just, you know, I am trying to listen and process so that I can help in any way that I can. I can tell you that if anybody had called me to help with that situation, and I don't want anybody to feel like they have to call downtown or anything like that, but sometimes it just takes
I encourage it.
more heads than one sometimes to problem solve it and figure.
Or somebody
figure
from
it out.
outside the immediate
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
sometimes can see.
Or somebody
one of the
with
things
authority can like make them do what they're supposed to do.
You know, I don't even feel like I have authority in that way, but I do have an understanding of autism. And particularly where our kids are concerned, there are times that perhaps my lens can see some of the things of, and I have assisted in situations where somebody's told me, well, the kid with autism is the one that's the bully. And you know, like we've all talked about, we can be the bully and the victim in some situations, but when you drill down to figure out what's really going on there, was it a difference of perspective taking? Was it, I didn't understand the social communication, you know, things like that. My own nephew was bullied because he said something that he thought was a good thing. You know, he was saying, oh yeah, I'm one of those, and I won't say what he was saying, but that lasted for years after that, because it just takes that one time to earn that label and so forth. So I get it, but I do want to hear, I do want to listen and see what I can do to impact change. So please, I'm not defensive. You tell me anything you want to. But if it's about particular students, I would appreciate you all sharing information with me privately so we can problem solve together.
She can make things happen sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get something special for my student. I'm just
No,
saying that this
no.
is an example
Right.
of
And you
something
know,
that I suspect
and
goes
the
on all
example
over
is
the
much
place.
larger than, if there were other districts here, I think they would tell you as well, is that this whole coding system that you're talking about is uniform within the state. And the way the information is reported to, like, safe and civil schools and those in places who monitor us, there are specific codes, legal codes that those are fitting into. So are those good? No. Do they, we struggle with them ourselves.
And plus, we still just have to come down to helping kids. And yeah.
Absolutely. There's subjectivity within
I mean,
anything.
to say 2 girls on 1 boy is not a power differential, and we said, okay, then can you provide us concrete examples of what that power differential looks like? And they, I don't think couldn't do it, I think that they wouldn't do it because they didn't want to be held accountable then to this framework that, you know,
it's a moving target.
And we have Tracey here, because Tracey can speak to some of those legal issues too. I think all of us together, as a collective body, can.
And that's what I'm reading right now. I mean, what they explain, the definition in here, bullying can involve overt physical behavior or verbal, emotional, or social behaviors, including excluding someone from social activities, making threats, withdrawing attention, destroying someone's reputation, etc. I mean, those are, that covers just about everything. I mean, which to me does not rule out common sense. If it's that subjective, I mean, why do you have to be so exclusive? And again, this is not directed at the school, but sometimes I worry if it's because they want to minimize the number of bullying incidents that they have.
I think it's
And
absolutely
about
because of
reporting.
And again, you know, problem solving between people doesn't require meeting any kind of legal stand, you know,
Yeah.
it's common
I
sense.
did bring this from our policies and procedures, and this comes from KSBA. Bullying refers to an intentional act by a student or groups of students directed against another student to ridicule, humiliate, or intimidate the other student while on school grounds or at a school-sponsored activity which acts are repeated against the student over time. These may include but are not limited to name-calling, teasing, threatening, social exclusion, and cyberbullying. Bullying may be physical, verbal, emotional, or sexual in nature. So I would just want to keep us all on the same page about, I think, I don't want to get us off on one particular event. And like I said, we'll talk about any specific cases, be glad to.
There's some, I kind of liked, one of the things I liked in this thing, it has, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but it has these 3 cases I'll tell you about, and I found them to be kind of instructive. So can I do this, and then I might turn this off? It looked like my computer was getting ready to have a fit.
This is a warm air.
So-
Feels good.
So these are the different sections of the letter. You can go into detail on any of them, but, so the first one is the overview of federal protections for students with disabilities in schools. So it talks about how they can get protected under Section 504, you mentioned that. They can get protected under IDEA, they can get protected under Title II. So there are a number of laws that can afford students with disabilities protection. There's a whole section on school obligation. One of the things is that schools must take immediate action to investigate what's happened, and particularly whether what's happened is compromising free and appropriate education for that student. That seems to be kind of the linchpin. You and Marie will know more than me, but it seems like that's one of the core things that's going on. So they want the IEP or 504 team to get together and say, what's been going on? Is this affecting this person's ability? And there's this linchpin of hostile environment. Has a hostile environment been created?
But I've been in an ARC meeting before where I brought up bullying and was told that that was not an appropriate place to bring it up. I mean, where is it?
Well,
It's
this
not-
sort of
I have
implies,
too.
I guess you would have a specific, you know, they want you to host, I guess, a meeting specific around it. I mean, this says that is where this.
But everyone in this room knows how hard it is to call an ARC meeting. You've got so many people that you have to get together. Why should you have to wait several weeks to address something that may be happening
Well,
right
yeah,
now? I
15
mean, it's
people going against
frustrating.
you too.
Bullying should be dealt with right away, and that is part of the
Well, yeah,
district
this is-
policies and
yeah,
procedures.
it has to be.
It has to be
It's the
dealt
obligation.
with right away. So, you know, again, I can't speak to every situation, but it is within any districts in the state policies that you have to, that's law, that they have to have a procedure for dealing with that.
Another thing that's in here that you guys might find interesting, it talks a little bit about how much of a change in behavior or academic performance might be necessary to, you know, to be able to call an IEP meeting or sort of to be able to say, okay, something's going on, free and appropriate education isn't taking place. It just had some examples. Like its example was going from straight A's to straight A's and 1B may not be sufficient to say that's significant behavior change. But then they had some other examples, somebody who started missing speech therapy class because they didn't want to go through this certain area to get the speech therapy, you know, this whole set of things that happened. The other thing that I got out of this is that the bullying, that there are sort of 2 different things, and that's what these little cases are. They're looking at whether, starting on page, well, it'd be nice if this had pages, didn't it? Sorry, no pages. They didn't paginate their letter. But Roman numeral 5,
Up at the top it has to be.
Yeah. Look at the top.
mine might be cut off of mine. So you can look at whether disability-based harassment happened or whether there was a free and appropriate education violation. So if somebody gets bullied about something that's not related to their disability, I guess fate could still be impacted, so you could have a problem there. That was interesting for me to think about. You know, whether the bullying was disability specific or some other type of bullying. And that so you can look at the bullying, the disability-based harassment violation, you could also look at fate violation separately. Both could occur, neither could occur, one or the other could occur. And that's what these examples are kind of taking you through, examples of both occurring, neither occurring, one or the other occurring. I thought the examples they helped me look about it. And I was looking at, the Office of Civil Rights goes through, this is just some of the core questions that they go through if somebody makes a complaint. Was the student with disability bullied based on their disability, yes or no? Did the school know or should it have known that free and appropriate education may have been affected? Did the school fail to take steps to end this conduct, to eliminate the hostile environment, to try to prevent it from happening again, to try to remedy the effects? And in this document, this could put you to sleep. It'll either rile you up and you'll never sleep, or put you to sleep. It depends on your perspective. But if you get in here, I kind of liked it. It had some examples of what, you know, what the Office of Civil Rights considered. Yeah, these are the things that a school should do. And it actually kind of gave me examples of, oh yeah, simple school-wide interventions. So this is sort of appropriate action versus, oh, this school didn't do enough. And you know, it seems like this sort of, no, this really isn't happening, I'm going to pretend like this isn't happening, of course, is not something that this document is recommending.
If you need them, Myra Beth, I think your clip is just going to need
Oh,
the
maybe
page
it
numbers
is.
under.
Well, I think this is it. I just
All right.
just wanted to draw these things to your attention. I learned from looking at it, and I thought you guys might too. And then the last thing I had is just what can help. We'll talk more about it, I'm sure, and Diann already started to talk about it. I don't know, does anybody know what the jigsaw method is? Do you remember that way back from the 1970s? Elliot Aronson is a social psychologist. He's written this great book that's it's not autism related. It was actually written after Columbine. It's called Nobody Left to Hate, which I love the title. The idea being, in his mind, that these Columbine people were people that acted out of being rejected and horribly treated by their peers for all those years. And he said, you know, what's the real way to do this? He thinks that things like school metal detectors, while he's not opposed to them, he calls those, you know, sort of short-sighted interventions when the real problems are far below and begin far earlier in kids' school environments. So he talks about using things like cooperative learning strategies where everybody has a piece to the puzzle very early on. So that, you know, even students with differences can be shown to be important members of the team. The team can't succeed without him. He's got all kinds of neat resources on his site. And we've already talked about educating peers about autism so that they really know why a person is doing that kind of thing. And I think just educating kids to how much people with autism have to offer and how cool they can be from a very early standpoint. I think about my own kids who are far from perfect, far from nice all the time, but because they've been lucky enough to meet lots and lots of people with autism, including their uncle, they know that people with autism are cool. And when they see somebody with autism acting differently, they know what interpretation to make. You know, they'll say, just really anybody they say acting differently, they'll say, is that autism, Mom? So, you know, they just know that's just what it is. And so trying to give everybody the opportunity to see the strengths that people with autism have. And it has to start early, you know, middle school. You know, better late than never, I guess, but that's a little late to start that kind of thing. Long term, and I think I talked about this earlier, long-term relationship building between the people with autism and at least some people, some peers, and trying to maintain that. It's not easy and it does not occur naturally. Can we all agree on that? It usually doesn't occur naturally. It requires some effort. So everybody has to work together to see what could work. Who would be the friend? You know, who would be that friend and how can we make that happen? How can we keep it going so that it doesn't just die when the circle of friends is over? How can we make it keep
And
going?
I've got something to say about that when you get done.
Yeah, go ahead. You're the what else?
Oh,
What
well,
else?
okay, well, you know, I've been thinking about this ever since you started this bullying thread, and, you know, in my mind, I think we need a three-pronged approach to this, and not just in Fayette County.
What are the prongs?
One of them is, I think we need a really good, you know, evidence-based bullying prevention program that can be implemented district-wide. And this is maybe gonna look different in the elementary than it will in the middle and the high. And I know that they've just started this advocacy and inclusion on a mission, which doesn't seem like it's totally anti-bullying, but it's about inclusion of people with disabilities and has some anti-bullying elements too. And I think that's a great start. They're just rolling it out in 2 schools this semester.
In Fayette
They're
County?
gonna add 2 schools next semester.
Fayette County's doing it?
Yes.
Or a parent resource.
Annette
center.
Jett through the Parent Resource Center. And I actually went to their first meeting.
What are the
other day.
schools?
Julius Marks and
I believe it's
Stonewall, I
Stonewall.
think. And they said they want it district-wide in 2 years, which I think is great. But we also, I think we really need something in the middle schools and the high schools as well. And she says eventually they're gonna, do a higher education. But I think, somebody needs to just look at what's out there and what does work. So that's one thing, is I think we need a district-wide bullying.
Science
prevention.
behind bullying.
Huh.
Science behind the bullying
Yeah,
stuff.
the
for
evidence-based
history.
thing of what does work. I think we need training for teachers, because I've heard some people say that some of the teachers are bullies too.
Well, teachers, I mean, anybody can be a bully,
And they
including a
may
teacher.
not, also, they may not be willing to report. Maybe that's what happened here, is that, I don't know if it's a lot of extra work for the teachers to report. The teachers need to have a zero tolerance attitude to it. Not just the teachers, the whole, anybody that works in school. Whether it be from the cafeteria worker that witnesses it to the principal. I just think if you witness bullying, you need to do something about it. And you need to know and be held accountable for that. But the third thing is actually, I think, something that I had to offer through my work. I work at UK on this, it's called a Peer Support Network project. And we're doing training around the state on how to support students with significant disabilities through a network of their peers. In a classroom, it may be a couple of peers that work with a student. But what I think is really neat, we have these peer networks outside of the classroom. And that's where you identify a group of 3 to 6 peers that, they usually will meet once a week, maybe 30 minutes in the morning or during their lunch period, just to get together with their network and talk. But then they can also plan things like, on Tuesdays or on A day, I could eat lunch with the peer, and I've got second block to third block, we have a similar schedule, so I can walk with the peer to their class. So we've done these trainings all around the state. We've had our 9 regional trainings, and Fayette County actually did send 2 or 3 schools to our training. But we've talked as a Autism Society of the Bluegrass about possibly bringing Eric Carter, he's the one that trains, he's from Vanderbilt, bringing him and doing, maybe like in the spring, and doing something with Fayette County or with surrounding counties if they want to be involved with it. It's a really great, I'm so excited about that project.
Did you talk to the co-op here, the Central Kentucky Education?
Yeah, they're involved with it. All the co-ops are involved.
Because that would be a good resource to grow that and to also.
And actually, that's the plan for, it's like a 3-year project, and we're in year 2 now, so it's not going to be there forever. I won't have a job forever, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but-
well, there is a lot of
it's gonna move
research
to the
that does
co-ops.
support those peer-mediated interventions, and even in the bullying literature, there's at least one study that and I can't remember off the top of my head, but the programs that you get that are evidence-based, they show that for the most part they'll reduce the bullying incidents by about 20%. So it doesn't, none of them, just take it out like we would want it to, but 20%, that's great, but it's not, it's good, it's not great. We'd like to see more, but some of the research around that has shown that even training the bullies versus training the victims and such, what's more powerful are the people that were bullied, when they surveyed those folks, what they found most meaningful was what the other kids did. How it was more powerful. Right, so when we talk about the peer networks, that really does get into the peer-mediated intervention things. That's really more about what the kids are telling us, that how those kids accepted them gave more power to the success of what was going on for them, to more acceptance for them than anything that they were doing for bully versus victim. And because I heard somebody say ignoring doesn't work. Well, I've heard my kids tell me that, not my personal kids. Well, they've told me that too, Mom. But a lot of the programs, that's one of the first lines of bully-proofing that child is teach them when to ignore. So you go through this process of teaching these prongs of when do you ignore, when do you ask for help, when do you do this.
And, you know, if they had a friend, if they had somebody that had got to know them, that might be all they need. And I also think this type of, you know, the way our program is designed is for kids with the most severe needs, you know, and they're typically kids on the alternate portfolio, but it doesn't have to be just for them. But I think what it can do, even if your kid's not part of the network, I think it can really change the culture of a school. If, you know, if a school has 5 or 6 peer networks going. And also, another great idea is that maybe a kid with Asperger's, because I really think the kids with Asperger's are more likely to be bullied than the kids with severe autism. They might make a great peer to be on somebody else's network, you know. And you typically try to match them up with if they have similar interests, or, you know, there's different ways to do it. But this is a great training, and we really want to bring it. And I've talked to Dr. Carter, and he's willing to do it.
What does that look like, or how would you make those pairings? Because I absolutely agree that even if he had 1 or 2 close friends, you don't need to be popular.
Yeah,
but
the
you need to
research
have-
says one friend really is
Exactly.
protective.
But that is so not important to him. He has no interest in meeting people, finding out their names,
Would he be
chit-chatting.
interested in being on a network of somebody that might
Only
need
if
more
they
help?
knew the ins and outs of Lego Star Wars.
So you're gonna have to find a peer that does, that likes that stuff.
Gotta be very specific.
I mean, that's
Well,
autism. The whole
and
point
you
about
know,
autism, it can't be a random person.
There's a
Yeah.
It
lot
has
of
to be a
different
co-obsessed
schools have
person.
done it, but one is through
Right.
discovering common interests. Sometimes teacher recommendation, if they notice, well, this person seems, you know, they might not be best friends, but they seem friendly.
I wanna, is that YouTube back there?
Probably is something I need to do.
I'm getting ready to go see what
But,
that is right there.
Yeah, so there's different ways of setting it up. But typically, you do want to find people with common interests.
Well, and one of
Because in autism, if the person doesn't have a common interest, why would I bother with them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
One
What's
of the
the point?
things that we thought about was maybe like technology club or,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't-
another approach is,
Yeah, try to find.
Try to find a sponsor that, in the school that's willing
Or
to meet with them.
interest-based linking rather than just social linking.
Yeah, the high schools have more opportunities for that. You know, middle school, there, you know, there's not a lot that goes on in middle school for groups, but the high school, there's a whole lot. I know
True.
one of the popular groups that we see a lot of our students on the spectrum participate in anime, like there's some anime clubs and there are
Good production,
technology, yeah, things like that.
The only problem is that the bullying is worse in middle school even than it is in high school. I mean, so by the time it gets to that point, a child may already be so isolated that they don't want anything to do with anyone.
I had something I wanted to add here, it's kind of on the same vein as what other people have been talking about. What I find works the best is if the bullies are held accountable, 100%. If you can get through the parents, get through the kids, they're gonna be expelled or suspended, because we had an incident down there in Bismarck County in the last year where a student was brutally attacked in gym class in front of dozens of witnesses. They pretty much expelled the kid. I mean, there has to be zero tolerance for that, and the family and the child have to be made aware, and then you might have some more accountability, and therefore it sends a clear message to other bullies, hey, this isn't gonna be tolerated.
And this
Knock
is
it
true of
off.
aggression in
Yeah.
general. I mean, if people observe people aggressing, the Bobo doll, remember the Bobo doll? You guys remember that? Albert Bandura. One of the findings of the Bobo doll is that if boys saw the Bobo doll getting hit by other boys and they were rewarded for it or allowed to do it, then they hit the Bobo doll harder themselves.
Well, I don't-
Versus if
I
they
don't know
saw,
about the Bobo.
it's just showing imitative learning. The Bobo doll's a little rubber doll and you can beat up on like a little punching doll.
Stays up.
You mean with the weight on the bottom?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they found that if boys saw other boys hitting the Bobo doll and not getting punished for it, then they would hit the Bobo doll. Versus if someone discouraged them from
To
hitting
me,
the
I
Bobo
think,
doll,
I
they
think
would
that we
stop.
are just, we have absolutely dropped common sense. As I was looking at your slide up here, and this is not saying you've locked common sense,
Oh, I have.
this
It's
is OCR
okay.
up here. Why should any of us have to say, was our child bullied on the basis of his disability? I'm an attorney,
Right.
and going through those legal definitions and having to prove that in order to get protection and a free access to public education for your child drives me insane. None of us should have to do it. No
It should be
child,
irrelevant.
and no parent whose child's being bullied should have to do that. It is common sense. You know what bullying is when you see it. You know what bullying is when you see it. Your teachers know what bullying is when you see it. Other kids know what it is. So when did we just forget common sense? I mean, you're absolutely right. There should be zero tolerance for it. There should be zero tolerance at the schools. There should be zero tolerance among parents. And until that happens, I don't see it getting any better. You know, I've got 4 kids in my household, 1 that's on the spectrum, 3 who are neurotypical. And every one of those kids knows that bullying will not be tolerated. And if I ever hear it coming, that you ever did it, you're in trouble. That's it. There's going to be zero tolerance for it amongst yourselves or with anyone else. And I think that message needs to get out to parents. I mean, it's not cool. It's not okay. It's not a rite of passage. It's not boys being boys. No. I mean, we see the thing. Look at what's happening. I mean, there was another school shooting this week, you know, and nobody knows why that child did it, but I suspect that there probably was some aspect of bullying somewhere along the way. I mean, it's got to stop.
Have any of you guys seen the movie Bully?
Yes.
It's an excellent,
It
excellent
is.
movie, and it was just on KET, so you can
Yeah, it
actually
was.
access it on the KET website.
Should be required viewing in every school.
That's what we
I
said
was
when we
gonna
saw
ask
it.
you, is that a
Mhm.
possibility that we
Yeah.
could, I mean, it's.
Because when we saw it, that was what we kept saying to each other. We're the choir. We're, you know, everybody
It is.
showed up
I
to
mean,
Kentucky for the screening.
It's
was
very
the choir.
powerful. I mean, there's 2 kids in this movie. They profile 5 different kids. 2 of them have committed suicide.
Mhm.
And another one is a kid with a lot of facial, you know, like some type of genetic thing where he looks really different and really weird. And, you know, it just, I think if kids and teachers and parents, anybody, I think everybody in the country should watch that movie.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's something that we could arrange for at least middle and high schools to see.
Mhm.
It may be a little too
It
disturbing for
is for
elementary
elementary,
kids.
yeah.
But one thing that's on there, there's a principal on there, and 2 different times, she basically denied that any bullying was taking place. You know, the one where she brought a kid that was being bullied and
Yes.
bullied together,
Mhm.
and got to get him to shake hands. Of course, the bully stuck his hand right out there. the
Oh,
principal.
yeah.
And the kid with the disability was just sitting there, or
Yeah,
I
he
guess he had a
was,
disability.
he was amazed, yeah.
He was just like, he was looking at that principal like, are you freaking crazy? I'm not gonna shake his hand.
Yeah.
And then the principal actually told him, she like bullied him into shaking this bully's hand.
Yep.
And she dismissed the bully and she said to the kid, now you're just as bad as him. You would not shake his hand when he was offering. And
Yeah.
would not listen to him. And then the other thing the same principal did was, some parents came in and talked to her about.
This is a documentary, right? Is it a
It is,
documentary?
it is a documentary.
Their kid being bullied on the bus. The principal actually said to those parents, I have been on that bus. Those kids are as good as gold.
Uh-huh, as good
But
as
yeah,
gold.
of course, you were on the bus. So I think there's a lot of denial among.
Well, research does show that
Yes.
adults tend to minimize bullying.
Mhm.
They, I mean, anything that you say is true about adults doing just that. The other thing that we need to remember about bullying
Yeah.
is the overt bullying is what is easiest to see.
Mhm.
Kids who hit each other or yell at
Sure.
each other in the hallways. But there's also a form of bullying that's always under the radar. So it may be that there's not an adult that hears it. There's not an adult that sees it. And that's the hardest kind. And you know, as a parent, that's what I've witnessed most. As an aunt, that's what I've witnessed most.
Kids are clever enough to do it.
Kids
in
are
a way
clever,
that's not-
exactly.
Relational aggression,
It's
you think?
relational aggression, that's what they call it among girls, and you've heard about mean girls and all of that good, not good stuff, all of that stuff. And it is very difficult sometimes just to assess the bullying situation. But looking at how you treat bullying, just getting back to that, is prevention. I mean, you know, prevention is the best for any sort of situation, prevention. And some of the things that we're doing within the schools now, you've heard about response to intervention and all of that good stuff, positive behavioral supports. You know, that is MTSS or multi-tiered systems of support for behavior. So all of the schools are trying to get on board with what that looks like. So when we talk about multi-tiered systems of support, I can't say that fast. We call it MTSS for short. But the first tier is what's happening within the general ed program. What is it that's happening for all kids? So universal programs for behavior that teach positive social relationships and inclusion and all of those things that we were talking about earlier, that's the first level of that. The kids who are not responding, the kids who are having the difficulty, that would be a tier 2 intervention. Those are the kids that need something else. They're not getting it from whatever the positive program is at that point, but they would need a reteach. Maybe it's something within their classroom, maybe there's a different program that we need to be working with them on. But then there's also tier 3. Those are the most intensive kids, the kids who, for whatever reason, is not responding to anything that we're doing, and we need something very individualized.
Are you talking about when you say the kids, are you talking about the ones that are being bullied or the ones that are bullied, or are you just talking in general?
I'm talking in general in both, but the kids, I'm thinking more of the bullies at this point. The kids who are those kids that are the aggressors, who are needing some sort of individual behavior intervention plan for that. That would be one way that the schools are trying to address those issues. But in terms of zero tolerance, the law says that if you witness bullying, whether you're the cafeteria worker, whether you're the door greeter, whomever you are within a school, if you see that, you are to report that to the principal. And then it's the principal's responsibility to assess that, to use whomever's on their staff. Maybe a threat's been made. There's a threat assessment protocol that's in place for that. That person, the principal, is supposed to pull those people together to assess what's going on and how can we address this issue. If there are legal issues, like a student has been threatened or there's harm, and physical harm or things like that, then other codes of conduct kick into that. So it's kind of like it's a multi-faceted way to deal with that. And I'm not going to tell you that I know all the ins and outs of that. Like I said, I'm not the expert in the beginning, but I do know that it's not an easy task for anybody, to assess what happened here when you're depending on other people to report. It's very difficult.
I think a piece that's missing, however, is the teachers' training in confronting bullies. I've been standing next to a teacher who watched bullying and said, I just can't handle this because I have to make a report to the principal, I have to do all these things and let them take care of it. Kids can resolve their difficulties. I'm here and I said, oh no you don't.
Yeah.
I'm going to deal with this now. Both of us will deal with this now. We did. But that's the point. Unless you're shoring up teachers and giving them the strength to deal with conflict, you're only looking at the students. You need to do both sides.
Exactly. And part of when you really do put a positive behavioral system in place, I'm leaving out the intervention, that's why I keep stumbling, because PBIS, but I always want to say positive behavioral supports. But whenever you put the PBIS system in place, it is teacher training. So it's teacher training from the get-go of addressing those issues. But it's not uniform, and you know that, Hazel, that it's not, PBIS is not in all of our schools within Fayette County. I can't speak for other districts, but we're moving in that direction. We don't even have the MTSS program in all the schools, but it is part of our district improvement plan to make sure that those things are being put into place. I saw another hand. Was it over here, over here? Yes.
My question is, how do, and this is like for everybody in the room, how do we go about preventing adults from bullying children in a school setting? Because that happens far too often, and I've seen so many reports on the news about how a teacher bullied a student.
Well, some of the same things we talked about for kids, adults need too. Not only peers need to know that people with autism, or whoever we're talking about, can contribute something positive to schools, but so do teachers. So example, if you have a school whose awards program at the end of the year is handing out awards for the highest scorers on X test, you know what I mean, and the whole school sees that that's who, you know what I mean, if you're setting up that kind of competitive environment and rewarding that kind of achievement and that kind of thing, then that's not just showing students that's even showing teachers. These are the valuable people in your classroom, and these are the people that aren't really doing anything for your test scores or your school, whatever. So we have to think about school climate, I think. And I want to say that I successfully protested that type of award program, and it was quietly and silently changed, actually, the next day. So, we can't, I had a lot of social psychology research quotes and I think this was somebody who had unintentionally done this and hadn't thought about the people that were getting the not so good end of things. And I think, so sometimes we can just raise awareness about what whole school kinds of things might do to what adults and kids think about our students with special needs and what kind of value they have in that little microcosm
Oh,
of
yeah, I
society.
think I thought
One of
about
the
it.
things that's changing in a positive way, kind of building on the culture climate issue, I don't know how many of you have heard about the new teacher evaluation system, principal evaluation system. The new evaluation system for certified staff within the state is built on these foundations of this Charlotte Danielson framework of, what is effective teaching, basically. But within that structure, we are evaluating the culture and climate of a classroom. So we are looking at what is the evidence, and it's not, and I can tell you this is huge because I had to take the test for evaluation, and really looking critically at what makes a good teacher. How is this teacher managing this classroom? And there are standards for that. There's criteria looking for the evidence of that. It requires multiple observations, direct observations. It requires peer observations. So many things have been built into the system that when it's really fully up and running, I think we're going to see some really positive changes in the educational environment. It uses data. I love that. It uses data to inform instruction. So teachers have to be able to talk about what data tools are you using and how are you using that to inform your instruction and change that. But it's not just about the academic piece, it's about the social behavioral piece. How are you responding to the diversity of your classroom? Diversity not just defined by ethnicity, but also by children who are different, children with developmental differences and disabilities. So it's all of those things. And there's some pretty stringent criteria in that.
Awesome.
What's it called again one more time?
We call it TPEX for short, but it's the Professional Growth and Evaluation System. And there's for teachers, there's one for principals. Right now we're piloting, it was the pilot year last year, so there were just a few schools last year that was piloting it, and this year we're going school district-wide. This year we are also doing other professionals, so like people that I supervise, the resource specialist and speech pathologist and school psychologist and all those other people are also being evaluated under this system as well. So we are all in this together. So really good stuff. So if you ever have the opportunity to just go online and read about it, it's good stuff. It's also in other hands.
Well, I was just gonna give an example of what Myra Beth said. This may not be relevant, but my son went to a middle school here, and I'm not gonna say the name of it, but at the end of the year, they had a program for just kids that made A and B honor roll, and they actually made all the other kids go out in the hall and cheer those kids on as they made their way to a program to reward them for being great, And then they came back with bags of candy. Well, so some of them had a bag of candy for being on the honor roll, and I think the other bag of candy might have been for perfect attendance or something. So you had these kids coming back in the classroom, some of them had a bag of candy, some of them had 2 bags of candy. Well, then the kids in the classroom didn't have any candy. And I actually complained to the principal about it, and she's like, oh, the PTA does that, so, you can't.
Educate yourself, PTA, about,
PTA doesn't have to do
about
that.
competition and
I just thought it
environments.
was just horrible to point out.
Well, just thoughtless, probably.
You're
It
just
is,
not-
it's
yeah,
really
because
deeply
they're like,
thoughtless.
well, we want to reward the good kids, but by doing that, you're effectively punishing the other. So I would love to see things like that eliminated.
And I would love to see no candy, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't get
Yeah, but the counter is that we also want to reward the behavior that we do want, whether that's scholarly behavior or good attendance or whatever. But, we've got to be able to get together and in some creative way, find a way to make those kids feel worthwhile
Yeah.
and part of it without it being at somebody else's expense.
Yeah, really good point.
You know, your success doesn't have to be on the back
Yeah.
of other people.
And people should be able to set their own goals, so then everybody can celebrate making progress toward their goals, whatever their goals could be, and everybody's goals would be different, you would hope.
I have a cousin who has, gets around in a wheelchair, and he's very intelligent. But the school that he went to, he was the statistician on the football team. And I think because the football team is glorified and are the cool kids, they all accepted him. And they had a ceremony where it was, who was the most valuable player on the football team. And they voted him the most valuable player because he helped them out all year round. And I think that really set a whole atmosphere, culture in that school of accepting people who are different. And it really, made my cousin feel terrific because he really loves sports and he can't participate in sports. But it seems to me that if we can figure out who the cool groups are in the school and get those cool groups to get involved in supporting the kids that are different and get them trained in regard to the bullying thing, that it can make a whole difference in that school's culture.
Yeah, there's actually been some studies that have shown that in schools that have done stuff like that, the bullying can be reduced by as much as 50%, which is pretty staggering. I mean, to cut it in half. And that's basically peer intervention, where when bullying is seen, rather than a teacher stepping in, having a peer stepping in. Other kids tend to listen to their peers more than what they do teachers, so.
They call that in the bullying prevention programs I've been reading about, bystander empowerment or something like that. And I think that's a key part of it. I think that's a key part of it. If you choose a program to go with, it needs to.
You gotta make it cool for kids to be able to do that. I mean, and it's, one of the things that I think the Fayette County Public Schools is doing well at. My neurotypical daughter is in 2nd grade, and they're teaching her, they just did something at Dixie Elementary last week where it's, I will, what do they call it? I will fill someone's cup, or I will.
Buckets or
I will fill their bucket.
buckets,
That's
yeah.
exactly
Bucket
right.
filling.
And they all drew a little picture.
You guys know
of how
about
they
bucket
would,
filling?
It's bucket filling, and it's something that's really resonated with her. And she says, "I won't bully anyone. Just I don't want to empty anyone's bucket. I want to fill up their bucket, mommy." And it's I hope it's something that we're teaching them young enough that we're going to have a new generation growing up that's going to be a little more sympathetic, but.
Prevention.
Yeah,
Prevention.
That's what I'm talking about when, at the last ARC meeting, or the last team meeting, I was saying, to change the words and to put new thoughts in the kids, in their heads. And, like instead of competition, making it about cooperation. And really speaking those words. Because I feel like that there's either love or a call for love. And the bullies are just calling for love. And they might be somebody that says to their mind, I'm not going to graduate. I'm not going to, I can't do that math. I can't do that, the academics. But I can be bad. I'd rather look bad than stupid.
Yeah.
Bullies
And
usually have
that
very
is
low
what they're
self-confidence.
saying.
Very.
And instead of saying, to me, instead of saying, get out of the school, because that's what they want, they think they want it, but they really don't. We've got to do something different, because the more you're bullying them, restraining them, they're just learning more bullying. And then they're going to be more powerful and in a bully way. And that's what's happening. We've got to change the words. We've got to really think, was that behavior love or was it a call for love? And if you think that behavior was a call for love, would you go and hold that person down on the floor? Enough.
So you're sort of saying for kids that might be behaving aggressively or bullying,
And that's
you're saying
typical
look for
or not
other,
typical.
you like the idea of looking for non-aggressive ways of trying to
And
teach them.
changing
And
the
Dian's sort of been talking about doing things early on. I think your idea really makes sense too. If you think about catching this stuff really early on and trying to see what is the function of this bullying behavior, right? What's the function of this? What's this trying to do for this
It's always
person?
a
How can we
call
get
for
this
love.
need met in some other
I
way?
mean, when I act out, which I do, I'm called on it daily. It's a call for love because I'm fearful about something. I'm afraid I'm gonna lose something. I'm afraid my granddaughter is gonna get through the next 3 years and her whole life is gonna be about restraining, people restraining her in life. You know, yeah, it's a call for love.
Well, I appreciate the empathy toward the bullies, because, the whole point of studying empathy is to try to think about what are all the good things that empathy can do for everybody.
I get bullied every day, and I don't like it, but it's like, it's hard not to treat that bully with more bullying,
I
to
mean,
get it to stop, at least temporarily.
where these bullies need anger management classes, I mean, is that a good idea? Maybe they just need to sit down and get some therapy with some counselors?
Well, I think it depends on the bully. I mean, I think you really have to functionally analyze what's going on with it, because there are different types
They
of
get
bullies.
counseled in the schools, don't they? On some level, if they're caught bullying, at least.
But they might be going home to an environment where they're being.
Where aggression is
Exactly.
modeled.
Exactly.
We're viewing a lot of aggression.
There's a lot of aggression.
Maybe
A lot of these kids they've done studies on come from very dysfunctional homes. I mean, very dysfunctional. And maybe they would benefit from some anger management classes or, one-on-one or whatever the school system can afford. Counseling.
think
Well, yeah, all the anger management.
that
But
link is
and then they
going
still
to
bully,
benefit in a
and then they
different
still
way.
bully, so.
I went to
Where's it stop?
a meeting about 2 weeks ago with it, Stop Youth Suicide. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, Dr. Omar over at UK. And one of the things we were talking about with bullying is that a lot of times the bullies, there's a reason that they're doing it. Just like you said, it's a call for love. You put someone down to make yourself better, lift yourself up. You're being bullied yourself. You come from a dysfunctional family. And one of the suggestions he made, which I thought was really interesting, is that if the schools were to refer these kids to status courts, so if the family courts get involved, and then the family court could order a psychosocial assessment on any of these kids that are bullying or are being bullied, so you can get at the root cause of it, they may be able to get some in-home services to help these kids that are bullies. Because you
not
gotta
a bad
figure out where
idea.
it's coming from.
It's not a bad
And my thought was, I said, that's a wonderful idea, but it's gonna cost money. And he
A
says,
lot of
oh,
money.
no, you're wrong, Tracy. He said, right now, we're taking all of these kids and we're putting them in juvenile detention
Oh,
centers,
yeah.
and look at how much we're paying. This is actually a
Yeah.
cost savings if we can get some judges to pilot the program, so.
And they're feeding off of each other. You put them all together in the juvenile detention centers, and they're just
They
like.
learn how to be juvenile
I
delinquents
never thought
there.
about that one.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
the issue itself is just so complex, because I've seen it on both sides. I've seen the kids who get into the system and the kids who don't. Mental health is so complex, and there are so many functions, as Myra Beth was saying, to those behaviors. And with a function for my behavior, while it may look the same on the surface, may be different from the function of Tracy's behavior, although we might be looking like we're doing the same thing. So being able to match that right support requires a lot of thought. And I've seen families who go down that route, and like you said, right now it just seems like out of control. You get in this diversion program, and sometimes that works for that kid, but other kids, they end up running away. And there's so many. There's not one good fit for any kid, and that's the one thing I can say about that is I wish there were more mental health services. I wish there were more access to services. I have a good friend and former parent that I still keep in touch with, who's fighting that fight right now in the adult world. And I've seen families tell me that well, they wouldn't serve my kid, they wouldn't keep my kid because they're 16 and my kid wasn't going to accept the treatment, so they had to let them go. Or then I have to have my child committed for 72-hour hold. And so there's no really good answer. The other thing, working with kids at school, doing anger management, trying to do replacement behaviors and things like that, it's by the time some of these kids do get to a certain age, they don't understand the behavior themselves. They don't understand why they're doing it. So when you're trying to get to the layers of that, it really requires a lot of wraparound services. Being able, there's not a lot of efficacy and anger management programs. We do them, but the efficacy is not good. It's really not a good evidence-based practice. What we do know is a lot with point of performance, being able to provide skills training and being able to help that child generalize that in the general natural environment. There's a lot more efficacy to that than pulling them out, taking down the hallway and saying, okay, let me teach you how not to be angry. You know, that's
it's a little
really
more
not,
complicated
that's
than
not,
that, yeah.
exactly, but we do it, and you know, the best services that we can provide sometimes are trying to keep them in their natural environment where we can coach them, you know, with peer coaches or adult coaches, or, you know, one of the things that we have right now that is an evidence-based program is PASS. I don't know if anybody's heard about that, but one of the premises behind that was being able to keep the kids in that program, to teach them the replacement behavior, coach them through it, and then if they do have a problem, they come out for a reteach and then go right back in as soon as they can. So, you know, we're learning a lot. There's not a great fix, but the one thing I don't want to forget here, we talk a lot about those externalizers. What about the internalizers? What about those kids who are depressed and, you know, that are who may have been the victim as well? That one of the things that we see in these kiddos is that they turn sometimes and become the bully because, you know, they're like, I'm not going to take this anymore, you know, and they learn to be the bully. And so how do you deal with that mental health issue? So I'm just saying it's complex. I wish I could give you that magic bullet, but it requires, like I said earlier, multiple tiers of support. It requires good wraparound services, and that is one thing that we're missing. So Judge Tracey, if you can help us with wraparound and help us, you know, build some of these services, because I talk to colleagues, I talk to the Ridge, I talk to, you know, Comp Care people all the time. You know, we have lots of people within our community, and I swear I'm not ignoring you, I'll get to you, but, you know, we talk to people within the community too. Now I'm on a roll. But, you know, if you don't have the right insurance, or if you don't have this, and it's $150 an hour to get with this person, and I'm somebody who's paid those, you know, tried to, I couldn't pay them either, you know, and if insurances don't kick in at some point, then we're all kind of scratching our heads. This child needs help, what are we going to do? Now, as a school psychologist in the school, if I know about your kid, I'm going to do the best I can to create a treatment program and work with colleagues and try to put that in place, work with counselors. I know guidance counselors, I'm not going to say it's just me as a school psych because that's my discipline, but it's not perfect either. You know, I'm going to make mistakes. And some of you in this room know that I do, but we won't talk about that right now. You can talk about tell other people later. No, all kidding aside, it's not perfect, but you know, there's just so many layers, and I'm open to those magic bullets. But I want to get to your question back there first.
Okay, my question, you're talking about the cost of getting these mental health services, but you're not talking about the stigma that's related to actually seeking out these treatments. I grew up in a home where it was kind of looked down upon to seek out services. I did that on my own when I was in college, and as a result of what I went through, now the same household has a slightly different attitude. I think mainly because the people in that household are more educated than they were before about the benefits of these services and the fact that there shouldn't be a stigma about it, but there is. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, that people aren't seeking out treatments because there's a stigma.
And that goes back to the whole issue of bullying, doesn't it? Because, you know, if you're different, or if there's something wrong with you, then
Or you show weakness
you
or
show
vulnerability.
weakness or vulnerability, that you might need help. Yeah, but you know, as a school psych,
What's the
Neurological.
Yeah, that's not the
chemical,
word, I'm sorry.
chemical.
Yeah,
I've been looking at different kinds of intervention programs, and what I keep reading about are these amazing camps they've got like an outward bound kind of experience plus very intensive mental health therapy, and people keep going, yeah, you should look into that, and then you look at the cost, and it's basically you have to take a second mortgage out on your home, but they're for, I guess they're for youth that have incredibly high needs. But could we do something like that in Lexington, or in the Bluegrass? Because having some kind of experiential where you've got, where you're climbing rock gardens, or you're doing physical activity where you improve your self-esteem and you're physically doing things, heavy work, and then there's a therapy component too. When I read about it, I'm like, that would be so awesome if a resource like that could be available to, just a common person that didn't have, an extra $50,000, sitting around, waiting. Because I know many kids of all different socioeconomic stratus areas that would really benefit from something like that, but they'll never get access to it because it's so costly, and that's.
We have a lot of good universities around. I'm thinking about EKU's climbing and outdoor,
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Maybe some of the resources are there and people just need to figure out how to
do
universities are always a good source of free labor.
Yes.
Just because professors are used to not making
A
much,
certain
right?
baseball player has been rumored to be starting an autism school and therapy type of thing in Lexington, but he hasn't done it yet.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I know with mine, we go to therapy for everything. We've got OT, PT, we've got brain training, we've got psychological visits. And to be honest, we don't think anything about it. It's just part of our daily living. All of his friends that he has, they know we go to therapies all the time because we go every week. And I think for us, we're just very accepting of we go see a psychologist.
And it's like what Sarah said, we're the choir.
Right. She
For us,
helps, I mean, she helps me as much as she helps him because she helps me, how to do his adaptive behavior, different things like that. So I think for me and my family, we just have all accepted that, and so therefore he accepts it, and he doesn't see himself as being anything different, so his friends doesn't see him as being anything different because they've grown up with him, and his friends are typical. So they don't even recognize that there's anything wrong with going to a therapist or an OT or a PT or anything like that.
Sometimes that can be cultural though, just even our own families can be a culture that are not accepting of that and how you're raised, and things like that. But I hope that your experience is going to become more of the norm, because I've been doing this for 25 years and I've sat on mental health task force one after the other, and that issue of lack of acceptance comes up a lot, and that stigma. That's why you sometimes see people with their doors for entrance is different from their front door, so that people don't even have to see you going in a lot of times.
And also with the insurance, I fought my insurance company and won because there's a Kentucky law. You get $1,000 a month towards autism. So if that insurance goes to fight you, I fought them and won for him to have speech, OT, everything.
Not all insurance.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
I think it's only for
But
insurances
mental health
companies
services.
based in Kentucky, is that right?
Well, they said all of Kentucky.
If your
Self-insured.
employer is self-insured, they're not covered under federal law, they're covered under state law, or no, vice versa.
Yeah.
Well, I've had
Federal law does
some
not
loopholes.
mandate autism coverage. The place where his dad works that has his insurance is self-insured, so they are not covered under state law.
And they do that.
It's
We're
about
talking about
half of the state.
But we're also talking about kids, the whole bullying issue. So some of those kids who may need the service aren't on the spectrum.
Right.
Therefore, getting those services for those kids can be even more complicated because you have to have a billing code. And if your insurance doesn't cover that, or somebody didn't take that insurance, then you're still kind of stuck.
Which is another wonderful reason why referrals to the court are so important, because referrals to the court, the judge has access to all kinds of services that they can be ordered to, and the state is required to pay for it. I mean,
And even
that's-
like our clinic it can be almost free at EKU. But for people just to get there, I mean, I think we're underutilized just because people can't get their kids there. or don't make it a priority for many reasons. Stigma
Right.
definitely is part of it,
But
but.
there's Casper here too.
Well, and one of the things that that's very disconcerting. I think it happens with all kinds of kids that get referred to the courts. Is that you almost have to give your child up to the state in order to be able to to get access to some of those services. And I think that's horrific. To me that is a systems issue that really needs
Well,
to
and it
be.
depends on where it is. If you're in status court, that's not gonna happen so much as if
Okay.
you're transferred over to what we call dependency, neglect, and abuse court. That's where sometimes that, it can be, you can have a child removed, placed in foster care, but a lot of times in status court, there was a recent, I think it's Senate Bill 200.
Right.
I may be quoting it wrong,
Systems of care.
but that basically has stated that the judges are supposed to put much fewer children in juvenile detention centers. I mean, that's something that they're trying to really go away from and trying to get more service-based type things instead of removing kids from the home. So hopefully that's going to make a big change.
I hope so.
I just think that, like what Patty is talking about and
Yeah.
some others, we really need to have that paradigm shift and let the kids get involved with, all sorts of, and make this a priority over and above else. Everything else as far as academics, because the pendulum has gone so much to academics, no recesses, no getting out. I mean, I see people, we're just an ADD society because of, we're not getting out, and I mean, I've seen things like on TV where they're having desks, that have little pedals underneath it so that these kids, can, because it helps them to, their brain to function. Just in my real estate office, the manager has a stand-up desk. I mean, and the tech person has a chair that he made where, it has movement type of thing. So we need to get on board with that.
It just needs to be a priority. I mean, it needs to be a priority.
And the kids, what I'm finding, being around college-age kids that are my granddaughter's age, 18 years old, they're pretty smart when it comes to stuff like this. I mean, we just really need to get them involved and listen to what they have to say.
That might be a neat thing to bring the university, the courts, and the school district together to support and sponsor, and also the Autism Society to sponsor something like that. Because it seems like the model court had a lot of collaboration, different groups within the community. And I think that this is also something that needs that kind of that collaborative kind of approach to it, where it's not just the school district doing the where everybody's at the table going, and seeing it from their lens. Because to me, that's the way you're going to make some kind of movement in the right direction.
It's a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not just a school
No,
responsibility.
it's not.
It starts at home.
It is. It's a community-based, and like I said earlier, it's not just one answer to it. I wish there were, but, it is very much a community, all of us pulling together to make it work.
To Myra Beth, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay.
When I was talking about a stigma earlier, about what I was specifically talking about was seeking out psychological treatments, and specifically a stigma about things like taking antidepressants and going and getting therapy, like talk therapy. Because, we were talking about the bullies sometimes need treatment for psychological disorders that they might have. And that's what I was talking about when I said a stigma about seeking out these treatments.
It might take a lot more bravery to face those things versus he just needs a good spanking or whatever, that sort of approach. Yeah. I don't know why people don't want to come see me.
Well,
To us by Skype.
to your point about
Make home visits.
getting the people who are, a lot of people not being able to come, not being able to get their families or get their kids there. There are lots of
Organization of it all.
issues. And not only that, but you'll you're gonna have a pretty good chance of getting the families that are already plugged in. And they know what services are out there, and they have a level of awareness about what's going on in their families. Well, there's this whole other population of kids who don't have that advantage of a parent who's with it enough and caring enough, and has all of
I think you
his
mean
or her
proactive enough.
issues ironed out to the extent that they can do all that, which is why having these things just automatically in the schools, like Patty's talking about, the peer supports, that is mandated by the school, and it's there for all the students and not just those whose parents will take them to psych visits and that sort of thing. So it's there, it's available, and it doesn't just help those individuals who are on any kind of a spectrum that can be diagnosed, and but all of the other kids who are what you would look at as adults as typical, but who go through their adolescence being picked on for some extraneous reason that has nothing to do with their mental acuity. And so, I mean, I think we all agree that that sort of thing would have benefits for the whole population. Even those who don't get picked on, never will get picked on, they'll have a level of empathy that will stand them in good stead into adulthood. And so I'm hopeful that, maybe something like that, and we can talk, and I know that you don't, make all those decisions, but maybe we can talk about who does and who we can get in touch with about that, and we would like to try to sponsor that. I mean, ASBG, we have some funds, and we see that as our mission, and if we can use those funds toward helping bring something in for the teachers that the school system would agree is of benefit, we would love to do that,
And remember, whatever you do, it can't just be talking, it has to involve rehearsal and behavior change to really make a lasting change in the system.
And I think that he does. I think that what he establishes in the peer in the peer supports training, they then have.
I do think there's that culture still. I mean, it's gotten better over the years, but I still think there is that culture that I know a principal was dealing with a kid who was hung up in a closet, and he just said boys would be boys, and didn't have the psychological implications of a kid several times being hung in a closet by other students. So I do think that there are still teachers and coaches and people who buy into the masculine, strong, bully, gotta grow up tough. Anyway, I just think that being kind is either being weak as opposed to being strong. I think we need to deal with that issue as we're doing.
Keep educating.
We're doing those things.
There was a coach, I believe it was just a couple of weeks ago, maybe in Utah. I don't know if you saw that, where a couple of his football players had bullied a couple of students, so he suspended the entire football team.
Yes.
That made if we had more people like that, we'd probably have a lot less bullying. Yeah. They all had to work their way back onto the team, doing good things.
Wow. Now that's accountability.
And that's accountability at its finest. If we all did that, we wouldn't have any problems.
Wow. Gosh. Did we solve everything?
I have a comment. I'm just wondering if we could look at also when an adult does see a teacher or a peer or a bus driver, not a peer, but a tutor or something, when they do in the school see an incident happen, why don't they go and talk to that child right away? Are there things like maybe they feel like, oh, there's too much paperwork that I have to fill out in order to follow this, follow up with this, or, and they think maybe it will be easier just to pretend I didn't see it, or, it
We're
might be
afraid that
interesting to
parents
see.
may get angry if I wonder
The parents
about
might
that.
get angry or whatever, just to kind of see, okay, well, with all the adults that are in the school system, if you saw one child push another, would you feel like you are able to support, just go up to that child and find out what's happening? Or do you feel like that's gonna be just too much work on your part, or you might not be following the right protocol, you might get in trouble or whatever? How can we just let them just go up, like a parent would if they were in a playgroup or something and saw this happen? The adults should be able to
think the
do that.
teachers find that level of reporting to
Well,
owners?
is it, will the principals just say, okay, I'll back you up if you do this kind of thing, or
What do you view?
I mean,
What do you see?
They should intervene right away. I mean, if there's something happening between two students, then they should be there. Or if it's a physical fight or something, then there should be a protocol within that school for how to address that.
I guess it's this protocol where they're gonna say, now what was that protocol?
No, it's not a
What am I
paper.
supposed
At
to do?
that
You know,
point, it's not a
well, maybe I'll
paper.
just pretend like
No.
it never
There's not a
happened.
reporting requirement on
No.
that,
So
or,
can they just, just say, okay, I'm gonna do what I think is right and feel like they're gonna be backed up by their
Teachers,
supervisor?
I mean, anybody within the school should, particularly instructional staff, should know how to intervene with behavior. So there should be some sort of behavioral protocol. There's the student code of conduct within the school, and so not every behavior incident requires a piece of paper to be able to intervene with that. So, but once it reaches a certain level, according to the code of discipline, then there would be a certain level of paperwork. But just to kids who are, just walking down the hallway and bumping into each other and saying things, yeah, there are strategies to deal with that. Once upon a time, or a couple of years ago, we trained with foundations in our schools, and there were parts of that was about off the wall and in the hall. So teachers were supposed to be in the hallway, manning like by their doors while the students were passing through. I think what happens within a district such as ours is that turnover, consistency, that becomes an issue. And that's why there's a big push right now with, like I said earlier, that we have a district improvement plan that includes multi-tiered systems of support for behavior, that positive behavior intervention support. I got the I in that time. So PBIS. But that's part of that, training teachers how to not only teach behavior, but how to address it. I like what Randy Sprick calls it, now I'm going to draw a blank, but skillful responses. So if I'm skilled in responding to students, I can de-escalate a situation very quickly by how I intervene with that student. We also, one of the things that the state requires now is de-escalation training for anybody who works with kids. So that's part of that, being able to de-escalate situations before it escalates. So if you see kids in the hallway or in the classroom, because if you look at behavioral data, most of the behavioral events actually occur within the classroom. So we do need our teachers to be able to be trained and to be able to intervene with whatever happens. But paperwork, I keep hearing people are worried about teachers having to fill out paperwork. If I witness something, I have to deal with it. And if there's a paperwork issue that comes with that, I don't have to fill it out right then. Maybe it's at the end of the day. Maybe it's I have to fill it out, send it to the principal by a period or whatever that might be. But that's, that's just one of the parts of the job that you have to do that.
So I guess I'm just wondering, has anybody even asked these adults that are in the school if, given certain scenarios, would you actually address it or not? And if the answer is no, what are the reasons why you wouldn't address those?
I don't know. That sounds like a research project in the making, but that would
You
be.
need to get the universities to do that survey, that's a good idea.
It doesn't have to be a big thing.
Barriers
I mean,
to
that's
acting,
telling teachers.
barriers to skillful
I
responses.
can see where paperwork would be a deterrent to some people, though.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is that we're asking the question, is there paperwork? Could that be a motivation for not intervening? How much does it take for an adult in that situation just to go up to a kid and say,
Stop it.
Stop it, and I saw that, I feel your pain, I'm here for you, or what,
If it violates the student code of conduct, then they do have to intervene in the way that the procedures and policies and procedures are put in place. But again, what I hear you talking about are just like momentary exchanges between students in the hallway, and that is just a matter of correcting a behavior. But if there is a physical altercation, then that kicks in those procedures for student code of conduct, or threatening, making threats and things like that. So
I guess
talk
what we're
about two
saying
different
is that it might
things.
just be easier for someone to say, oh, it's just a one-time thing, I only saw it the one time, they'll probably not do it again. It's just easier not to have to deal with it and, pretend that it's a one-time thing.
I can't speak to that. I mean, sure that you have a specific instance in your head.
No, I don't have a specific instance.
But just, I mean, just in the process of being.
Dismiss everything I say because.
No, I'm just trying to be effective. I mean, effective teachers can intervene with behaviors within the course of their classroom, and there is no paperwork required with that.
Do they have to though? I mean, if I am a student and you're a student and I come by and I do that to you in the hall and keep on going, and a teacher sees it, I mean, does Fayette County Public Schools tell those teachers you should go up and say that's not acceptable, stop it? I mean, or does it have to be a physical altercation where there's blood?
I would say that's a teachable moment,
Okay.
and that's where, you know, you do intervene, you do see it, you do correct that behavior and intervene with whatever that situation calls for.
But
Is
do
there
you
any
know that your
accountability?
teachers will do that?
That's what I want to know,
I'm
is there
just thinking-
accountability?
You, just ask, you know, would you do this? How would you respond?
I suspect
if
most
you
of
saw
them
a
are
child?
not.
That's what I want to know, if there's accountability.
And then
Thank
why
you.
yes or why no? And kind of address, you can kind of give them a couple situations, escalating one, just a bump in the hall or a bad look, and then all the way up to actually a shove. And find out, would they address it, would they not, and why, and fix those, when they said why they would not address it, just fix those issues. Instead of saying there are protocol in place, you know that, and you would do that, but would an aide who's been on the job for a week?
And
No,
that goes
and
back to
maybe
the
that would be-
skillful responses. So if someone is skilled and trained in how to address that behavior, then the expectation would be that they do
That might be
address
an
that.
expectation, but would they actually do it? As I'm just saying, just ask,
Well,
ask the
that's
question,
kind of
would
like
they actually
asking,
do it?
I could not answer for person to person. Would I say that, teachers on my watch would do that? I would say yes, but can I say that in the reality of what happens in the course of the day? You know, we could certainly do a survey to that effect, but if you ask me from a policy procedure perspective, then yes, there are things in place that teachers are supposed to be doing within each classroom with every.
I wasn't asking you in policies and procedures, you were asking what things can you do to
Yes.
help?
Yes.
And I was just making a suggestion that maybe you ask the people who are actually on the job, actually there,
Okay.
how they would address the situation.
Well, I like the idea of multiple perspectives, you know, you sort of, it seems like there are lots of perspectives. There's the parent perspective, there's the person that feels they're being bullied, there's the person that's doing the bullying, and you're sort of bringing up, there's the teacher perspective, you know, finding out what their perspective is and what they think their role is and what they think their ability to act or react is.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning a long, month-long thing, just a day.
And, you know, Jan Hatfield may actually know the information. Like I said, I'm not the expert in all areas of behavior in Fayette County schools. But Jan, I know that she analyzes a lot of teacher data. She analyzes the discipline data within the district. She may have some of those answers for you already, but certainly we could pass that along to her as a thought, to see how, if polling teachers in that way. I know that they do a lot of, I won't say a lot, but I know that they do some of that within the positive behavioral intervention support trainings and the things that they do within the schools for that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Well, here's what concerns me, because I've been advocating for children, and I've actually sit in Fayette County in the past 2 weeks for a child, helping a child. And I had a teacher, one of the Fayette County teachers, who told me, and this child had a 504 plan, and she informed me that she was going to follow the 504 plan. And that's kind of concerning to me, considering it was a federal law, so I informed her of that. But she wasn't aware, she said she was too busy to follow the plan. So that kind of concerns me, that if she's too busy to follow a federal 504 plan, that concerns me that they would have the time to even fill out these bully reports.
Or even consider any protocol.
Or even consider them. So I just want you to be aware of that, because this is the teacher evidently who's been teaching for a while. It's not a new teacher. And I'm not from Fayette County,
You can
so-
talk to me about that later.
No, I'm not gonna do that, but I'll just let you be aware of it.
I want to bring up something else here real quick. There are instances in my experience in which my child was made to be a scapegoat. He was set up as a form of bullying by other kids who knew that they could go hide and disappear, and my child caught the flack for it. So that is something that I think everybody, I don't care whether you're parent, teacher, professional, whatever, has to be looking at, is the exact situation that he probably was set up. If that was the situation, which possibly upon investigating that there were other people involved, and then that's why the child got into trouble. Because this certainly happened to me, and it's probably happened to a lot of other people too.
And these can be criminal matters.
Yeah, it's like,
later
oh
in life.
yeah,
Right.
I'll double dare you to go steal something over here in this store, and then they're caught with a juvie record for the rest of their life for shoplifting.
Hold my ground.
Yeah, they were set up because they didn't know that that was gonna be a bad idea. So, it's just something to consider.
No, and that's I think that's one of the things I said right away when we were talking about why our kids with autism are often victimized.
Targeted.
Because
They're targeted
they can't
because, yeah, exactly.
be coerced into doing things,
Mhm.
so absolutely.
So,
One of the things that I would say, I don't know what our time is now, but I think
Uh,
even
We
Tracey
can,
brought
we
this
can
up.
wrap up.
We're over.
Yeah, we're over, so I appreciate anything else you wanna
Yeah.
say, go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead and finish.
I think one of the questions came up earlier about IEP, and can you talk about bullying at your IEP meeting? One of the forums that you as a parent come to an ARC meeting, one of the first questions I hope that you're being asked, because this is how we train, is what are your parent concerns? And anything that comes up related to your child, we do want to hear about that. There are some things that an ARC, an admission and release committee, cannot address. And so maybe sometimes that's where it's not transparent to parents. And I totally understand that, because we come to those meetings and there's, all these people there, and it looks like you're being ganged up on because we've got more special ed people and more school district people there to solve this problem than, it takes to screw in a light bulb or whatever that joke might be. But the reality is that can be very intimidating, and I so get that. I've sat on the other side of the table, and I know what that feels like from the parent perspective, and the family member's perspective, but at the same time, I would love to make it more transparent, but sometimes that legal mumbo jumbo, as much as we try to downplay it, it's still there. But if you ever have a question, is this the forum that I talk about this in? Is this the ARC? Sometimes it's not, because it might be beyond the power of the ARC. What I would ask then is, well, then who do I talk to about this? Is this the principal issue? Is this, do I talk to the guidance counselor about this? Do I talk to your administrator about this? Whatever that might be, because oftentimes, there are so many systems within a system that you may not know how to negotiate that. And if ever you have a question, I encourage you to email me, call me. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to connect you with the person that does. And because we do understand, and it's hard. We may not seem like we do sometimes, but it can be very hard to negotiate that system. So bullying, like I said, there is a procedure for that. There's a procedure for ARCs. But the other issue, if your child, if you feel, or data tells you whatever that might be, that your child is being bullied, like I said earlier, some of the literature talks about bully proofing. What skill does your child need? Is it the advocacy skill? Is it, being able to understand the perceptions of others? What is that roadmap? What does that look like toward teaching your child to be a better, I don't want to say this word, but advocate, because we can never truly account for all the variables for any child within the course of the day. Even, the typical child who walks in that school building, something can happen. But if there's a skill that we can teach to make them more empowered, that's the word I'm looking for. How do we empower our kids to be able to advocate for themselves, to be able to read others, to do the things that typical kids, develop, like Brenda Smith-Miles stuff about the hidden curriculum. Do we need to teach more about the hidden curriculum? That's, that's one of the things that I see a lot in our schools, is that our kids don't understand the hidden curriculum. And maybe that's something that we could do a better job of, and writing goals toward understanding that.
But we can also we also have to teach other people how to understand people who do not and will never
Right,
completely
right.
understand the hidden.
Yeah, I get.
Right,
Because
and
we're
I
never
think
gonna make
that-
them understand it.
And I'm
That's
I'm not minimizing that.
can't
I'm
happen.
saying, there was a question earlier about what can I do in
Right.
an ARC
Or
meeting?
how could that fit in an
Yeah, how
ASBG?
can that fit in an ARC meeting? You know, that's, those social goals, that's where we really need to focus on social language and things like that. So that's, I'm not minimizing
You gotta look
those
at
other
that.
things.
Well, I
But if
think that, I agree with you, Myra Beth, I do think those things are important, but a lot of times when I read, like, what can I do, you know, I've been doing some online research, and it kind of pisses me off that we're putting all the onus on the kid
They have to change.
that's being
right.
bullied, like,
Right. And
yeah,
please don't think that's what
we
I'm
need to
saying.
do-
That's
I know,
not what I'm
I know,
saying.
But I do think that we need to do this anti-bullying program school-wide, to really find out which ones are more effective. Do something like the peer support network. I just think there's so many barriers between kids that are different, not just with disabilities. And I think some of these programs can break down those barriers, and, you know, if we can do this broadly enough, we can really affect change even once the kids grow up and leave school.
And I go,
It
and
just
I
has to be
agree.
really intentional.
I
We
agree.
can't just expect it to.
I so agree, and that's why I said prevention, you know, it has to be, it can't be any one entity, it can't be any one effort. We
Yeah,
can't
there's
put all our
multiple.
eggs in the one basket, and please, 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 just because I said the IEP thing, I
No,
was just trying to
no.
respond to an earlier
I
question.
understand.
It is a, you know, it is a wraparound, you do have to have multiple supports for our kids to impact change, and it does take all of us, it takes the community, it takes the school, it takes parents, it takes the universities, training teachers and our kids, so it takes all of this.
Well,
Thank you so much.
thank you
so much for
so
coming tonight.
much.
Thank you.
Yes, and then we let you guys get back. You have to travel back.
Oh, no, this Friday.
Ah.